Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Your First Job in Dentistry, Acing Your Interview. I am Linda K. Tyler, the Director of Business Development for ASDA, and we are glad you have joined us as we have an informative and interactive presentation planned for you. During the presentation, we encourage you to submit questions via the Q&A feature, and our presenters are eager to answer your questions and help you understand more about the interview process. We like to recognize the Association of Dental Support Organizations as the sponsor of tonight's programming. Now I would like to introduce our presenters, Priyanki Amaroliwala and Christina King, and our moderator, Heather Weddle. Priyanki is the Senior Manager of Talent at 42 North Dental. A graduate of the University of Baltimore, Priyanki serves as an integral part of the human resources team at 42 North Dental that provides talent acquisition for over 100 dental practices across the country, focusing on both general dentists and specialists. She has over 15 years of experience, most recently in healthcare, including the private duty home care and senior care sectors. Christina serves as the Director of Recruitment for United Dental Partners, with over 20 years of experience in high stakes recruiting and human resources. Christina applies a deep understanding of human resources, employment relations, and a strategic approach to talent acquisition. Previously at Elite Dental Partners, she created a cohesive team, ensuring that recruitment strategies align with organizational goals. Her mission is to foster a workplace culture that values collaboration and diversity, leveraging a fluency in Spanish to bridge communication gaps and enrich the professional environment. And Heather leads our membership strategy and engagement for the Association of Dental Support Organizations across a growing national member base. With deep experience in association management, she is passionate about fostering community, evaluating member value, and creating impactful experiences that connect dental leaders and industry partners. Outside of work, Heather enjoys traveling with her family, playing golf when she can, and cheering on her two sons at their sporting events. Please join me in welcoming Priyanki, Christina, and Heather.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll turn it over to you now, Heather.
Fantastic. So excited to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This is going to be hopefully what proves to be a very interactive session. As Linda said at the top, please submit your questions. We really want to hear from you. We've definitely come up with some starter questions to get you thinking about preparing for interviews and the whole process of your first job. So some of the learning objectives that I wanted to go over quickly here, so that when you leave the session, you'll feel you are informed and prepared to kind of adequately prepare for an interview and looking for your first job. So that will be hopefully what your key takeaway is after tonight's conversation. We want you to have a clear picture of what to expect throughout the interview process, thinking about what questions you are able to ask, maybe ones that you should reframe differently. And then a real important takeaway tonight will be understanding what some of those non-clinical skills are that companies are looking for, often referred to as soft skills. So hopefully tonight you'll feel better equipped, more informed, and have some of your specific questions answered throughout the session. Uh, Linda has already gone over the question, how to submit your questions. My apologies. So that's a bit repetitive, but please use the chat. It's open and we're waiting to hear from you. So, as I said, this is going to be a Q&A session for you all. We want to hear what's on your mind. We want to answer your questions. We've broken the session down sort of into three areas. First, we'll talk about how to prepare. What are some of the things you can do beyond looking at a website? We'll get specific about interviews, what to expect, where are the red flags, types of questions to ask, even right down to what you should be prepared to do the day of, perhaps how to dress, arrive early, some of those tips. And then, most important, the follow up. What to do after your interview, and as you continue to consider some different options for your first job. So here is where we're going to quickly, before we get into the Q&A, I would love to kind of get a sense of who's on the call. Linda, if you could set us up for a quick poll. We'd like to understand sort of what your aspirations are for post-dental school. I was about to vote, but it says I cannot vote.
Heather, I was going to do the same thing. I was trying to vote too.
It's okay.
Couldn't help it.
It is tempting. Okay. All right. It looks like we have some responses. So thank you to all of you that took the time. We have a few in the crowd in the group tonight that are interested in pursuing a job at a DSO. We have several that are looking at residency. We have some unsures, and then we have some those interested in becoming an associate at a private practice. So a really nice mix for Christina and Priyanka as we answer our questions. It'll be good to know, be mindful of kind of where the questions are coming from. So we're going to kick things off right now. It's before your first interview. You're considering where you might apply for your first job. These are some of the things to think about as you set off to sort of build your plan to go through, looking for your job. And I will admit that these are some tips that Priyanki has put together. Priyanki travels quite a bit and speaks to students on a regular basis, and these are some of the things that she likes to remind students of as you're getting prepared. So I'm just going to read through them quickly, and then we'll pause for a couple of questions for Priyanki, and then Christina to get us started. So first, I think at the highest level, you should be considering all options. I guess we don't know what we don't know. So keeping your mind open to different things and to learning more about the job environment, the landscape, and different types of employers and places to work. Locations, be open to locations. You may think that, a certain city or town may not be right for you, but unexpectedly it could end up being a perfect fit. So be open to options and to listening to what employers are going to tell you about where the locations are, where the offices are, what the communities are like. Those are all big things to keep in mind. Get your references ready, collect your production numbers, and consider preparing what Priyanki calls a proof book. So maybe this would be a great point to start, Priyanki. Could you speak to the group a little bit about what you mean by a proof book? Because I will say there is a question from the audience about creating a clinical portfolio showcase. So maybe this fits right in well with your proof book.
That is correct. So you can call it a proof book. In layman's terms, I like to call it a brag book. if that makes sense. And it is basically what will be displaying your clinical portfolio. So obviously what that is it could be a simple binder, it could be a simple folder, but it's something that you will grab and go at every interview. So if you've got 10 interviews scheduled, or even if you have one interview scheduled, the folder must be there and it should be ready to go. And the folder is simple. All you need is obviously copies of your resume or your CV, some type of bio or something if you have that. If you want to use a cover letter, put that in. And then it talks about the production numbers that I recommend. So when we talk about production numbers or collection numbers, we understand that if you're in dental school, you're obviously not going to have that, but some type of procedure log would be fine, just to kind of show what types of procedures you feel comfortable doing. And obviously you have to make sure it's HIPAA compliant. So if there's any names or anything like that that's on there, just cross those off. But essentially, when you go in for an interview, you want to make sure that you're well put together, not only physically, but like with all these things that you're going to have in hand. So the proof book could also be, you guys are all part of ASDA. We, like us employers, we love ASDA students. You guys are the leaders of your organization. You guys are the cheerleaders also of your organization. So you guys are the ones who can really, sell opportunities to your other students and talk to other students about what it's like to work at other companies or whatever the case might be. So talk about your ASDA experience. If you're in ASDA leadership, talk about that, what your position is, and, have all those things ready to go in your proof book or your brag book so that, you're really setting yourself apart from like another new grad that's coming in. So, and essentially, when we think about like, and I'm sure Christina agrees, when we post a job, like even on Indeed.com, like to say you post a job for a dental practice in Chicago, you might get about like 5 to 10 applicants. Some of them are new grads and some of them are experienced ones. When you look at the interview process, of course, you would think, the dentist who's got the experience should be considered. But having said that, some practices are open to new grads, but we're obviously open to new grads that are quote unquote hungry to learn, that, have a good personality or have a good drive to make this happen. So some of these things will just help you stand out compared to the other applicant that's coming through, if that makes sense.
Fantastic. Christina, did you want to build a little bit on that? Do you have
No,
additional things I know that specifically one of our students asked about showcasing work like RCTs, implants, restorative cases. Do you have any thoughts on that?
no, I agree with Priyanki, and to her point, when you're a new grad, you obviously don't have, production numbers to look at, which is some practices and some organizations will be hyper focused on that. So I think the other thing I would say is come prepared, and I think we get into this a little bit later on, but come prepared to talk about yourself and what you're going to bring as a human being to the practice. Because what you do with your two hands inside a mouth, yes, that's very important, but there are other things that thoughtful employers are going to consider in terms of making a hiring decision outside of how many extractions you've done, et cetera, et cetera.
I love that. It's a very much a relationship based career. And so I love that aspect of bringing yourself and highlighting that. That's fantastic. So one other question that I would pose to you, Christina, is on research. So you've got your proof book, Priyanki, you've put together the things about yourself and you're ready to go. As you start researching, do you have any tips for the group of where they might want to do some research beyond a website? Like what other places might they go to learn a little bit more about an organization before they go and actually interview?
Yeah, I would say whether or not it is a DSO practice or a private practice, to go and look at the patient reviews online of that practice. Now, one thing I will say, I would urge you, if you're looking at former employee or current employee reviews of the practice or the DSO, I would just encourage you, and even sometimes with the patient reviews, but sometimes the patient reviews are a little bit more insightful. But one thing, having been in HR now for 30 years, and you all will understand this when you start practicing, but people tend to make reviews when they're angry, not when they're happy.
Mm-hmm.
So think about maybe you have been in that situation yourself out at a restaurant and you've had bad service and your first inclination is to go and write a review, but never when you've had the best server in the world present you a beautiful meal because you're so happy. So I think the reviews are important, but just do understand that a good portion of those reviews oftentimes don't come from a good place. But I do think it's a good jumping off point to, at the bare minimum, then when you are speaking to that employer to ask questions, hey, I read this from a former employee, or I read this from a patient. Can you elaborate and can you share a little bit more information?
Sorry about that. Yes, absolutely. Okay, fantastic. So, um, getting back to sort of connecting, I've done my research. I have the things that I need in my book. Um, how do you think, how should a student go about evaluating the culture component? That is a big piece of, finding your fit. Where do I feel like I will thrive? We all have our types of people. So what do you think? I know the patient review is one aspect. Are there any other places they could look to try to get a sense of culture for either of
Glassdoor.
you?
Yeah,
Okay,
Glassdoor.
Glassdoor.
We're in the age of technology. The world is at our
Yep.
fingertips. So let's use that. Let's use that. I mean, you can go on glassdoor.com and technically look up reviews for even if it's a private practice. Private practices might have lesser reviews because they've just have lesser employees. But typically, if you're going to be working at a DSO, Glassdoor will give you the reviews. Even Indeed.com, which is also linked to Glassdoor, they will also have reviews like employee reviews. Um, and then, I kind of agree with what Christina said. The best thing is just go on Google Maps. That's my best friend. I love Google Maps. I literally go on there. I type in the practice name, be it a private practice, be it a DSO, whatever it is, type in the practice name and the reviews don't really lie, right? So if you have a lot of negative reviews, that's like a red flag 101. Like that's definitely a big red flag. And then if you've got consistent, really good reviews, then you already know what you're walking into. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the technology really allows us to work efficiently and capture what we're looking for quickly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think the group we seem to have answered some of the group's questions. I had a couple, we've done the ones that I was thinking about for preparing. So I'd like to move, if that makes sense, into the actual interviews, and what to think about when you're actually, interviewing, day of. And so let's think, as we think about the interview, there's a few things. One, at a high level, and I say this too, even in my work, it should be a two-way conversation. They're evaluating you and you're evaluating them. So think of it that way. I do want both of you to address this concept of confidence and assertiveness, versus more of a negative lens of those. And then assessing the cultural fit. Now that you're in seat, what kind of questions should you be asking to understand more about the culture? Soft skills, we'll talk about that. This one, I know Christina and I had spoken a little bit about this concept when we were prepping for the call for you all tonight, and what is shadowing versus working interviews. So she'll go a little deeper in that. And then maybe touch a little bit on what are the expectations as a new dentist from the employer side. So, why don't we start with the sort of this question around confidence and assertiveness? Do either of you want to just talk a little bit about, through the lens of the student, how to harness sort of these energies so that they do come off in a confident way versus what might be construed as arrogance? Do you want to start with that one, Christina?
Sure, sure. So I think the old adage, don't get in over your skis, I think really applies here. So be confident in what you feel very comfortable in from specifically a clinical standpoint, and stand by that, right? Present your quote unquote evidence, your data in terms of why you are confident in specific areas, and be open and honest and say, and don't say, I don't know, I haven't done enough of this, or I don't know about this, and say, I want to learn more about. Because that presents actually assertiveness, that you are telling this employer, like, I'm here to learn, I want to learn, and I'm here asserting to you what I hope to gain to learn from you. And if they're not willing to be receptive to that and then teach that, that I don't want to get step ahead, but that kind of gives you an inclination into the culture fit for you, right? So that kind of kills two birds with one stone. I think the line gets a little blurred into arrogance and pushiness is when you're overconfident and say, here are the procedures I can do. I don't need anybody. I think what the practices are looking for, whether it's private or a DSO, is somebody who wants to come in and be collaborative with clinical and non-clinical. So just be sure that there is no intimation of arrogance or pushiness that gives the perception that you are not willing to be collaborative with your potential future colleagues.
I love that. Yes. And I also liked what you said sort of around framing, your questions, that if you don't know, but you're willing to learn, and going deeper with that, what would that look like? So that's really good about how you frame the questions. As we build on that, Priyanki, do you have a few questions or types of questions that that the student should be prepared to ask to sort of move past any of that confidence or arrogance questions and just get into more of a conversation where they can show their true self? What kind of two-way that would stir a two-way conversation? Do you have any
Yeah,
suggestions
I
for
would
some
say,
questions like that?
yeah. So I do want to add one point on the arrogance and pushiness side because it's
Yes.
top of
Yes.
mind and it bothers me every time. So I do have to talk about it.
Good.
You guys are laughing, but I'm just pretty transparent about it. You know, I love my conversations, and I'm talking about initial conversations. Like these are like phone or the original phone interview, like the first phone interview. I have a lot of candidates, including new grads, especially new grads that are like, oh, hey, what's the compensation? And, do you pay collections versus production? Or, what's your per diem and how long is it? And is there a sign-on bonus? And although I like all these questions and I'm happy to answer them, what I realize is the arrogance comes in when they start having multiple conversations with different employers and they almost just have it in their mind that they need production versus collections, or they need X amount of dollars on a per diem, or they need this. And the thing is, you haven't even like done the interview. Like we haven't even brought you into interview yet. We haven't even offered you the job, and you're ready to like just start negotiating during that first conversation. So I would please, like, if anyone can take my advice today, which is, that is that line of arrogance and pushiness. So most employers don't really appreciate that. What I would recommend, and it's what Christine and I talked about earlier and what Heather mentioned, be open to a variety of opportunities. That includes different type of compensation models because essentially the world of dentistry is you're technically working in a commission-based position. So even though you might think this number is low versus this number, I would truly listen to the entire opportunity, go through that process because you have to understand the entire package versus just pigeonholing specific things that are in your mind based on what you've heard from, your other co-students or other students that have graduated before you or, your professors or whomever it is. So, that's something that I definitely felt like I needed to state. And then the other piece is, we talk about it before too, but like do your research, like be super kind and, like get to know the person. Like it doesn't have to be so serious and so professional all the time. So, someone like Christina or I could be on the phone with you. I love my favorite conversations are the most easygoing ones where people are like, "Hey, Priyanki, where are you based out of?" If I say I'm based out of Boston, they're like, "Oh, how's the weather?" You just kind of open up. Like it doesn't have to be super, oh, well, let's go right into the meat and potatoes. Like I love it when someone tries to get to know me and tries to break the ice with me just by getting to know me personally. It just gets to be a warmer like relationship, and whether they work for us or not, it's nice that like we can actually break the ice and get to know each other. So I would just say like soften it up. It's, treat this like the way that you talk to your patients in dental school. You want to make them feel comfortable. You want to make them feel, accepted and welcome. So you should do that for the person that's going to the interview with you, and they should do the same thing too. And the way that I realize it is, if that other person doesn't seem so warm, try to like break the ice a little bit, try to soften them up, and I'm pretty sure that they will, open up as well if you're able to be vulnerable and open up with them as well. So hope that helps. Just be super easygoing, be kind, be cool, and like get to know them, and then once you kind of get to know them and open up, it will be such a softer conversation.
You want
Priyanki's
to build on
exactly
that,
correct. Yeah,
Chris?
I'm sorry. Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Yeah,
Of
Priyanki's
course.
Priyanki's exactly correct because also what we're trying to identify is how you are going to interact with the staff and the patients. Because I often say that the staff interaction with the doctor should not supersede or the patient, excuse me, the patient interaction with the doctor should not necessarily supersede the staff interaction with the doctor. We expect that listen, it's a dental practice. The doctors are viewed as the leader of the practice, whether you have direct reports in that practice or not. And so we're looking to identify how are you going to interact with the staff and the patients alike. And then taking just one step back, something earlier that Priyanki said when she said, look at the entire package. I also want to encourage you all when you do get to the point where it is time to talk about compensation, et cetera, please also take a look at the benefits that the practice or
Mhm.
the organization has to offer, because it isn't just about your pay. So you could have really great pay, but then you're having to go out and fund your own healthcare because you don't have company sponsored healthcare or dental or vision. You don't have a retirement plan of, a 401k with a company match. And I don't want to get too far down that road, but since Priyanki said the entire package, your benefits are part of your compensation package.
Super smart. I love that. And Priyanka, I don't know if you want to, I heard you say this before. You've recommended to students when they set out to really put together sort of a tracking document. If you know you're going to have 3 or 4 interviews, essentially build out, I think you said a grid, and so that you can really start to look at things
Correct.
and
Correct.
try to evaluate, while it's not always apples to apples, at least your apples and pears, you can start to, and like you said, Christina, sometimes, one thing's going to outweigh another, but if you don't sort of have that landscape view of it, it's hard to sort of think in a system way.
Yeah, you're right, Heather. Like basically the way that I see it is it's great. You guys chose a great profession. Like you chose to become a dentist, right? Congratulations. That's an amazing profession. You've got a lot of opportunities, like a lot. And I'm gonna have to say that one more time. Like you have a lot of opportunities, but it's so much though. It gets to be so much that it becomes overwhelming and it becomes intimidating. So case point and example, you can go out and let's just say apply to 10 jobs tonight. Mark my words, probably minimum 7 out of those 10 employers will reach out to you by the end of the week, for the most part. And my point is, though, now if you end up having 7 conversations by the end of this week, your mind starts getting jumbled up as to who's paying what. Okay, so Heather at the private practice, I think she's paying 30% of collections. Christina at the DSO, I want to tell you she's at 31% of production, like you just start getting things jumbled up. So it's best to take diligent notes during these conversations when you're going to talk through compensation or whatever the case is. And like Christina mentioned, it's your compensation package includes your benefits. So you have to take diligent notes during these interviews or during these conversations and have it set up so that there is like a quote unquote grid. Like, all right, so we interviewed at private practice where Heather works. Dr. Heather interviewed me. She's got 401k. She's got this, this, this. All right. Now we interview with Dr. King at her DSO and she's got this, but then she doesn't have 401k. And now I've interviewed at 42 North with Priyanki and Priyanki has 401k, but she doesn't have a 401k match, but Heather does. So like if you have this grid set up or this table set up where you can kind of go through what's offering what, that will be easier for you to kind of go back and make like compare, what the entire package was. And then lastly, yeah, compensation and benefits, that's all important, but it's also all about like the gut feeling that you had during that interview, right? Like, how did they make you feel? Like, did you feel like you were welcome? Did you feel like they opened up their home to you? Or did you feel like they barely knew that you were there. They were just scrambling to like in between patients to meet with you. No one was really prepared and they didn't really feel excited. So you also kind of have to like take a lot of those things into consideration. It's all about how did someone make you feel, which I would hope that because you're in dental school and you're in the patient facing world, you're going to understand those interactions.
Thank you. I have a specific question about benefits. Maybe Christina, you want to. So this is from one of the students. They wanted to know what sort of the standard vacation benefit at dental practices looks like. In corporate and tech companies, they can have up to 3 weeks of vacation with sick days. What does that look like in the dental space?
Sure, thank you. Well, my answer is a non-specific answer, and there's a reason for that. I would have to say, and for context, in my 14 years in the dental space, I've worked with candidates in about 20 states. So
Okay.
a lot of states have bare minimum legal requirements that they have to provide full-time employees. So I'm in Chicago, so in the state of Illinois, there is a bare minimum that employers have to legally provide. So the answer is, if you are in a state like that, that has that, then that would be the bare minimum, and that would be what you would expect, particularly when you're new. Now, a lot of employers, the farther up you get in your tenure, the more years you have with the company, certainly more time you could receive. But there truly isn't a standard. But I will say the smaller private practices, you probably will not have a lot of paid time off afforded to you, just because it is financially burdensome.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on. So we've heard a couple of things both of you have spoken about, have touched, I think, on what we would call maybe some red flags. Are there some things to look for in your interview as you're asking questions that might be a red flag that you would want them to be mindful of? I think
Yeah.
you touched on it, Priyanki, on just one, how do you feel? I mean, you're looking for a cultural fit. You're looking for a place where you want to be excited to go to every day. So that's sort of that. It's not question based. It's really how do you feel? Are there any types of maybe some asks that they might make of you that are not best practice or?
I would say for red flags, it is when forget about going to the interview. If you felt like scheduling the interview was really tough, that's always a red flag. And what I mean by that is, let's just say, let's call you Heather. Heather's the candidate, and we schedule Heather for an interview, and then we reschedule and then reschedule or just things like that don't really add up. I feel like that's too chaotic and it just makes it seem like either the organization is unorganized or whomever it is unorganized or the doctor's unorganized, that's a little bit of a red flag. So like that, pay attention to those things. And then also, I mean, I coach my team on this all the time at 42 North. You guys are busy in dental school. Like, there's so many different clinics out there. Like, I know the Boston clinics, like Tufts and BU, they don't end like this. The students don't get on until 7 p.m. Like, your schedules are super hectic. A lot of these dental schools make the students work on Saturdays. So my point is, you guys are doing like at least like 5 to 6 day work weeks. So any employer that's not willing to really like rearrange their schedule to meet with you, that asks you to like come in on during business hours, like a 9 a.m. on a Monday when those are going to be like your patient scheduled times. Like that's a little bit of a red flag because they're just not flexible. You know what I mean? And that's okay that they propose it. Don't be offended if that's what they propose. But if you say, hey, listen, doc or whomever is interviewing you, hey, I can't come in at that time because I'm seeing patients, but I'm happy to come in at this time or whatever the case is, or I'm happy to rearrange my schedule. Like if they're not willing to work with you based on your schedule, always going to be a red flag right there.
Great. Christina, do you have any tips for them that would be
Yeah,
a build on that?
well, one of my red flags is on this list, so we'll get to it when we get to it. But
Yes.
another red flag would be when you come into the practice in person and they are unwilling to have you speak to the doctor who is there or other staff members. That is a huge red flag. Now, to be fair, I have been in situations where I have had doctor candidates come in and the doctor who is working in the office is just busy. They're patient first, but I always try. So if they're making the effort, like, hey, let me go see, if Dr. Priyanki can step away and they're trying, that's fine. And it can't always happen, but if there's not at least the effort or the willingness to do so, that is a red flag.
Okay.
Agreed.
Wonderful.
Agreed.
Great. So back to some questions. I think one of the questions I have for you, and we touched a little bit on it. So our audience wanted to know a little bit more about benefits and packages. You talked, Priyanki, sort of about the total package, how you might want to track. Let's dig in a little bit more on sort of the compensation, right? What can a student expect? How can that conversation go? What can they ask? Is any question off the table or all questions on the table? So how should they really approach compensation?
All questions are on the table yeah, all questions are
Great.
on the table. Don't be shy. I tell this to everyone, but my point earlier was just don't go into negotiations during your first conversation. But having said that, when it comes time to negotiating, let's just say you finalize in three different offices that you really like and you got lucky and you got offers at all three, which is great. Now it comes time to like negotiations, right? So for negotiations, like when you see a contract, the worst thing that happens, and I see it often, especially with the dental school students, is you guys ghost. So you can't do that. You can't go ghosting. That's unprofessional. I'm going to have to say that again. You cannot go ghosting. And I will say that again, you cannot go ghosting. You have to be professional. You have to tell this employer they deserve to know if you're going to go with them or not go with them. Either way, a no is okay. Employers are okay with being rejected, but they're not okay with the whole ghosting situation because that actually ruins your opportunity to potentially join them in the future. And yes, you better believe that you might want to join them in the future. It happens all the time. Most students that come out of dental school, their first job, they leave in less than a year. They typically leave within the first 6 months of their first job because their first job wasn't exactly what they thought it was going to be. Those numbers looked a little flashy, or that boutique practice looked really nice to them. or maybe they got wooed in because it was an easy commute in and around a big city. There was something that got to them where they quickly signed or went in for that, and they usually end up like going to that practice that they originally declined. So always just tell the truth about if you're not going to come on board, and that's okay. Again, it's not a big deal to say no, but it is a big deal to not say anything. That is unprofessional, and I will tell you that negotiations are always okay. So doesn't matter if it's a private practice, if it doesn't matter if it's a DSO, when you have an agreement in your hands, you are absolutely allowed to ask any questions that you want. You're absolutely allowed to negotiate things. And if the employer says no, which there are a lot of non-negotiables, the employer will just have to tell you in a kind way, hey, listen, we can move forward with this. But their job is to say I can move forward, but their job is also to tell you in a nice way, like explain to you why that they can't. So if they say no, 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 and they don't explain it to you, then that's a red flag because they just seem, like they're not flexible. But if they tell you, hey, listen, I can do this, but I can't do this because of this, then at least they're explaining to you. And at that point, you have to decide what works best for you. But everything is negotiable, whether it's a restrictive covenant, whether it's a termination period, whether it's the compensation. I mean, there's so many variables into contracts or whatever, and everything is negotiable. Everything can be questioned. You don't have to be shy at that time. And also, I will tell you that, you might feel intimidated looking at this contract, but obviously the person who's offering it to you might be super comfortable with it. So if you feel like this is all language that you haven't seen before, which most likely it will be, and if you feel like it's intimidating, yes, obviously go and seek legal advice should you want to choose that route, or go to your clinical instructors or your professors from school, or any, I don't know, any family member or friend that's willing to look at it. Definitely do that. But also don't be shy and ask that HR person or whomever it is that's presenting the contract, ask them to walk you through it. Like they'll like the easiest way for you to understand it is through them directly, and they will literally take time out of their schedule. And again, if they don't, then that's a red flag. But they should be able to take time out of their schedule to even do a screen share, or kind of go through your like points, or like kind of review all points with you so you truly understand it. So I would recommend that to everyone that's on the call today, to definitely like schedule time directly with the person that's presenting the contract, because they know the contract in and out versus any of the other people that you're going to go to.
That's a great tip. So thank
Yeah.
you. And as part of the evaluation process, Christine, I wanted to get to this. We spoke about it. You as the candidate, the student evaluating the employer. Can you speak to us a little bit about shadowing? So if they're invited to actually shadow at a practice to see what it looks like day of, life in the day of, versus a working interview, and what students should be mindful of between the two, and what's different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. I'm going to hold everyone's hand when I tell you this. Um, Shadowing is great. Working interviews, not so hot. So let me explain the difference. Shadowing means that you are coming into the practice, you are in the operatory, you are watching the dentist, how they interact with the patients, you're watching the procedures, you're watching everything, right? Working interviews means that the employer wants you to come in and literally be in the patient's mouth, that they want to see how quickly you work, how well you perform a particular procedure. Here are the pitfalls, and they are not good. Number one is they're likely just looking for some free labor for the day. Number two, you are not an employee of record, so you are not covered under their workers' compensation. So if you stick yourself with a needle, if you slip in the hallway on water, that is all on you. They have no liability. Also, oftentimes when they're asking to do this, you may not even have your license yet. So that's a problem. Additionally, let's say you do have your license, but you don't have your NPI number yet. You don't have your medical malpractice policy yet. That is also very problematic. So the bottom line is that asking you to be in a patient's mouth performing a procedure that a dentist would do is incredibly problematic and puts you in a potentially very illegal, difficult situation that you don't ever want to be in. So I can just tell you from our perspective, from my perspective, when we have a doctor who is getting ready to start and waiting for their credentialing, whether it takes 15 days, 30 days, 45 days, whatever it is, they can come in to the practice and be in the operatory with the doctor as little or as much as they want to watch these procedures and watch the interaction, but we will never ask someone who is not an employee of record and maybe not even a licensed dentist yet to be in a patient's mouth. Hard, full stop.
That's so helpful, and it definitely struck some interest with our audience because one of the participants wants to know how they could respectfully say no if an employer asks for a working interview.
That's a great question. I get that question a lot when I talk about this topic. And I think you can just go back on the things that I mentioned and just say, I have some concerns that I would not be an employee of record. And should, something happen in your practice, I have, that I am not legally protected. My health is not protected. I think it's perfectly fine to say, I don't have my medical malpractice policy yet. And I said this once, and I don't know how it was received, but I'm going to say it. And no, thank you. I'm not comfortable with that as a complete sentence.
Yeah,
And anyone,
fantastic.
and here's the thing too, and anyone who understands any private practice or organization that understands compliance, healthcare compliance, legal compliance, HR compliance is going to be perfectly fine with that answer. And if they don't understand that, then that tells you that they don't know enough in order to have employees working at that site.
Yeah, yeah, that's helpful.
Another
So
red
I want,
flag.
what's that?
I said another red flag. That's another red flag.
Yes, and
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. It's our attendees are getting a nice list of red flags. They'll be well prepared for things that, if anything, should not feel just right. I did want to change gears slightly because I want to touch on so the clinical. You're evaluating your different options. You know what not to do. You've got your list of red flags. Let's talk a little bit about soft skills. And I know that goes hand in hand with sort of the culture. How do we how do we present ourselves? So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of these 5 C's that employers look for, right? And what are the 5 C's? Critical thinking, communication, collaboration. You've already said that, Christina. I think I remember hearing you say at the top, creativity and character. Um, how can you guys give some examples of how these things might materialize in the day to day? Either, I think, Christina, you talked about the relationship that you will have with the doctor or the dentist as well as with the patients. Do you want to speak a little bit to any of the C's or as a collective, how the students might want to start thinking about that and showing that when they're in the interviews?
Yeah, I honestly think a lot of that goes back to what, I had mentioned earlier, that it is really important to exhibit how you are going to care for your patients and and this kind of, I guess, goes to character. What is your chairside philosophy and how are you going to interact with the staff? And I think it's also important to ask, like, hey, if I have a patient who is unhappy or I have a team member who is unhappy, how should I be addressing that in your environment, in this practice? Because that also goes to character because different people receive feedback in different ways, right? So I would say those things are very important. And I mean, let's be honest, like I said earlier, it's great to bring your portfolio, but you don't have a portfolio as long as your arm as someone who's 5 years out of dental school, and you don't have procedure lists as long as your arm as someone 5 years out of dental school. And so this soft skills part is incredibly important for you to lean into and really exhibit who you are as a person and show what you are going to bring to the human beings. Because this, yes, it is healthcare, but this is very much a customer service, if you will. I hate to seem like I'm dumbing it down, but the patients are going to come back to the doctor who makes them feel good in the chair. They don't know that you just did the best filling that they've ever had. They have no idea. All they know is how you have made them feel in the chair. And so when you are being evaluated by a future employer, they want to be able to feel that through your character, that their patients are going to feel that way and want to come back to the practice to be seen by you.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Yep.
I agree with Christina. I was gonna say like the dental schools, like I would trust that you guys are in a great dental school. I'm sure that they're all awesome programs, and we trust that the dental schools are doing a great job in
Mhm.
teaching you clinically. And we don't do working interviews, so we really don't know how your filling's gonna be. We're gonna trust that that's a good one. But having said that, the best thing to do to shine during this interview process is literally by, being yourself, being kind, and, showing off your personality, but not in an arrogant manner. Just, like interaction with the person that's, whether it's the HR person from the get-go to the doctor that's interviewing you or the practice manager. And then when you're at the practice, I will share a cool story with you, but like when you're at the practice, it's all about not only being nice to the person who's interviewing, but also how do you interact with the receptionist? How are you interacting with the practice manager? How are you interacting even with the patients that are sitting there in the lobby? How are you interacting with anyone and everyone that's there? Because the thing is, the dental practice, one can't survive without the other. We need the hygienist, we need the doctor, we need the assistant, we need the front desk, we need the manager, like we need everybody. So everyone must be treated nicely. And my story I have to quickly share is I recently at 42 North Dental had two stellar candidates, two really awesome candidates, both awesome. I was personally more excited about one of them because she was top in her class. She was the president. She had all these awards, blah, blah, blah. Her CV looked a little better, although both were awesome. I love the personality of the one that I just talked to you guys about. I got both of them to interview with one of my senior doctors in Natick, Massachusetts, and I assumed as soon like they both interviewed on the same day, I assumed that that doctor was going to reach out to me and say, "Hey, Priyanki, I really want to hire." Her name is, let's call her Heather. So I really thought I was going to get a text that night saying, "Oh, I'm excited about Heather." But instead, she was really excited about Haley. And that's okay. I was happy to support. Haley was also awesome. I asked the doctor, I said, I'm really curious to know, why did you choose Haley over Heather? She said it was simple. Haley came in for the 1 hour interview, ended up staying longer. That's fine, like if she didn't have time, but she's like, she ended up staying longer and she didn't care to shadow me. She was shadowing the assistants, and she's like, she literally walked around from operatory to operatory to operatory and got to know every single one of my staff. And she said to me, Priyanki, as soon as she left, my team came hounding to me saying, "Doc, you have to hire this person." So, like, she's like, it was a decision made directly from my team. So
It's
that's
a
how,
relationship business.
yeah,
Yeah, and how you show up. So
yeah.
it's not a hard thing to do. I think people, especially everybody on the call, just need to know, just get comfortable with the idea, be yourself. And I like that both of you have said that. I do want to make sure that we get one of these questions in because it's from the audience. And I hope I pronounced this correctly. Um, it's a technical. Should you bring your loops? Is that how you say it?
The
Loup
loops. Mhm.
loops to the interview. I've been asked this, but it wasn't stated as a working interview, and this is the first time I was asked to bring loops.
It's what Christina said earlier. That sounds like a red
Okay.
flag. I've never asked. I've been at 42 North Dental for 10 years. Not once have I ever asked any candidate to take loops in.
Never.
Okay.
Again, we trust. We are going to trust, and we are assuming and we are trusting that you will do well clinically. And even if you're not at to the level that you want to be, we understand you're coming right out of dental school. We know that we have senior doctors in the practice that will eventually get you to where you need to be. But like being asked to take loops for an interview is weird. I'm sorry.
Yes. So what I'm going to do is we only have 5 minutes left, and I love that we're getting so many questions. I do want to wrap us up with sort of what to do after the interview and maybe touch a little bit on expectations like as a new dentist. We can kind of wrap those two things together. As far as what you do after your interview, I think this is sort of a best practice across all industries, but you do want to say thank you. And thank yous can come in different forms. Do you prefer written over email? What are your personal views on what should be in a thank you and how soon after an interview should a thank you be sent? Either of you can chime in.
Yeah, I'm very old fashioned. Like, who doesn't like a thank you card? Like, you don't get those anymore. Those make you stand out. So I would recommend if you get a chance to actually give the thank you card in person when you're there. So for instance, if I'm going into Heather's practice, I already have the interview scheduled. I can already have a pre-written just thank you note just to give to her before I leave. And you ask how soon. There's no how soon. You can do it the same day. Like that's the best time to do it when it's top of mind. And that way it's top of mind for them. It's top of mind for you. You knock it off your list. And I'm a big believer that a thank you is not just to the one person that interviewed you. It doesn't necessarily have to be that one doctor that interviewed you. The thank you should also go to the HR person that's representing you, that helped you coordinate everything. The thank you should go to the practice manager. Even if the practice manager spent 15 minutes with you out of an hour interview, then the thank you should go to her or him as well. Anyone that's involved in the process, you should generally have a thank you note. Now, does it have to be super engaging and, paragraphs about what you guys spoke about? Like that would be awesome, but that's not the expectation. Just a simple thank you, less than a paragraph. Thank you for your time. It was lovely meeting you. I look forward to next steps or whatever it is. That will go a long way. And believe it or not, Heather, like we just don't receive them. I don't receive them. I really wish I got more thank yous.
So Christina, same thing. Does it reframe your thinking if a candidate does that and goes the extra mile? I know I pulled up some statistics that I was able to find about hiring managers who receive the thank you notes versus those who don't.
Yeah, yeah. So, our process at United Dental Partners is all the doctors kind of start with me to get a lay of the land before they go to the office for the in-person. What I like
Yep.
to receive is whether it's a text or an email. And again,
Mhm.
Priyanki is talking about being in person. I'm talking about before that. So we're talking about two separate things.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I like to get a thank you, and then I like the person to recap why they think this position is good for them because it tells me that they listened, that they picked up on the points that I was telling them about the role or the organization, and that they
Right.
actually listened to what I had to say. So, hey, Christina, thank you so much for your time. I was really interested in X, Y, and Z about the role, X, Y, and Z about the organization, and that's it. And that's all I need to know.
Yep.
Yeah.
That also helps you too as the evaluator of what resonated with the candidate and what's
Exactly.
of interest to them. I like that. So just before we leave, are there any things you want to talk about that the students could sort of look forward to as a new dentist? They're just about to set out and find, the first job in a very successful career. What can be some expectations around being a new dentist, like their first 30 days or their first year? Do you want to highlight anything positive in that space?
For me, I have to say, having worked in urban areas and suburban and rural areas, is you can do anything for a year or two to pay down your student debt. So do not, because something farther, like I said, I'm in Chicago. So something in the city of Chicago, honestly, is not going to pay as more as it is out in Rockford, Illinois, 2 hours west of Chicago. So be open because you can do anything for a year or two, right? And
Mhm.
also, without the saturation, you're going to have more patients and you are going to get in your first couple of years, if you're more open to your location as a new dentist, you are going to get more procedures, you are going to get more patients, you are going to get more confidence rather than being in a saturated area or an office with a doctor who wants to cherry pick the most expensive procedures and just leave you doing, for example, fillings all day long and nothing else. So be open. Be open to where you are going to be so that during your first 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, you are maximizing your education and then being able to take that experience and apply it practically to your personal life to pay off some debt. Because listen, we all know all of the faces you're seeing right now, we know how expensive it is.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I agree
That,
with Christina. I agree with Christina. Be open-minded about opportunities. And when I say opportunities, location is key. So the more rural that you get, the more money that you're going to make. It's pretty simple. And we're not even asking you to go that rural, right? Like same thing. I work in for a Boston-based organization. We're lucky that we have three major dental schools in our backyard. But the fact of the matter is, everyone wants to be in and around Boston, and although that's okay if that will be your only opportunity. But as Christina said, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of students that are looking for jobs in and around that area, so it's harder for you to find a job there, or at least a job that's the right fit for you. And then second of all, even if you go like an hour outside, like even if you get an hour outside of Boston, you're gonna have a lot more patience. You're going to be able, and the thing is, more patients is great, but like more patients that are willing to go in and see the new doctor that's there versus when you're going to be in and around a big city, you have more entitled patients that are going to be choosy about whom they're seeing. They're going to try to see if they find reviews about you. And then if they don't find reviews about you, they're reluctant to even see you versus the people that are in the more rural areas. Those are the people that are quickly coming in. They want to go see the dentist. They don't really care who the dentist is. They want to go in and they want to do the procedures and get it done and move on of their day. So you have a lot more opportunity to become more confident in your skill set, in your clinical ability, in your speed, and your ability to connect with patients.
perfect. Thank you. Linda, I know we're over time. I'm going to
Yes,
let you
but that's
wrap.
okay. That was a good wrap. So,
I just want to say
Priyanki,
to the students,
go ahead.
please, if you're interested in anything that has to do with dental support organizations, you can go to this website, dsodifference.org. There's a lot of information about what a career would look like there, and we have a matching tool. So back to Priyanki, if you have some thoughts on where you might want to work, it can put together a nice list for you to consider when you're mapping out your interviews and putting together your career plan.
Yeah,
So with that,
actually,
thank you all, and thank you to our two presenters who are actually members of the ADSO. So we're very pleased to have them with us today and appreciative.
Heather, I'm sorry, I forgot. You're right. I do have an interview rubric full of like questions that are already created through dental school
Oh,
students that I've talked to recently, actually at the
okay,
ADSO annual meeting. So I have
okay,
that ready. So if anyone is interested, I don't know if you want to give out my contact information or whatever the case is. I do have a rubric ready to go.
okay. We
We
can
can
absolutely
provide
get that
that.
to the
We can
students.
provide that in our follow-up
Oh,
to all of the
perfect.
registrants.
Yes.
So
Perfect.
Priyanki, Heather, Christina, thank you all for a wonderful and engaging webinar this evening. We can't thank you enough, and especially the Association of Dental Support Organizations. We are grateful to you for actually sponsoring this webinar, and to you all for hanging in there with us this evening. We hope that you receive some very important nuggets that you can use and will use going forward. If you'd like to view this webinar again, it will be posted in 1 week on ASDA's YouTube channel, and it's also going to be saved in the webinar directory at asdanet.org, and that's under the programs and events on our website, and it's also under webinars. We will also send you a reminder when the webinar is available on the website. So you'll get this along with any additional information our panelists and ADSO would like to provide. So again, thank you all for joining us this evening. We hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.